Welcome to Chillers and Thrillers Extra, paranormal stories just for my YouTube subscribers. Before we get started, please remember to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share with your paranormally inclined friends and family. Now, let's get started. The Mimic in My Old House. Submitted by Ghislaine, 22 December 20. After recently moving out of this house and with no incidents in the months since moving, I feel like I'm ready to share my story. Essentially, in the house my family used to live in, there was some sort of entity that could shapeshift and look and mimic people or animals. The first encounter happened in late 2019, after we had already lived in the house for over a decade. I was in bed with my girlfriend, and we hadn't yet fallen asleep that night. I got out of bed to go to the bathroom before going to sleep. On the way out, I turned off the light. When I returned and opened the door, my girlfriend called out and asked who was coming in. I responded that it was obviously me, and she screamed, so I turned on the light. She was freaking out, so I asked her what was going on. She said that a couple of minutes before I got back, someone, who she presumed was me, had entered the room, got into bed, and started cuddling up to her. When the real me actually came back, she realized that she wasn't laying next to me. She moved as far away as possible, but when I turned on the light, no one was in the room besides us. She said it felt just like me cuddling up to her. We ended up staying at her place that night, and she refused to come back. The next incident happened on the 11th of July, 2020. I was watching the TV by myself when my dad opened the door and stood in the doorway. I wasn't paying much attention to him and absent-mindedly asked him if he ended up watching the end of the game his team was playing in, because they had made a pretty good comeback. He didn't respond, so I looked over at him and noticed he was wearing one of my shirts, which was strange because it's not something he had ever done before. I then looked down and noticed both his legs were there. My dad had his leg amputated in 2017. Normally he'd have a fake leg, but one that's basically just a metal pole with a foot on the end, not one you can mistake for an actual leg. I must have had a serious look of shock on my face because right after looking at his legs and noticing what was wrong, he backed away and slammed the door. I ran down to the back shed where my dad was earlier and found him there. I asked if he had just been in the house, and he said he hadn't left the shed in hours. I didn't want to tell him what happened, so I just said I thought I had heard him calling. I found the shirt my dad was wearing on the floor along with a bunch of other dirty clothes. The next incident also involves the mimic pretending to be my dad. My dad is a diabetic and will occasionally have a hypo, where he becomes non-responsive, and it can sort of like be talking to a child who will hardly respond and doesn't really know where they are or what's going on. My mom found him sitting on the couch, and he wouldn't respond to her when she talked or nudged him, so she was worried that he was having a hypo. She went to the kitchen to get insulin, but when she returned, he wasn't on the couch. She then freaked out because she couldn't find him. After searching for a few minutes, she tried calling him, hoping that his phone was on him and she'd be able to hear it. My dad answered his phone because he'd been at work the whole time. The last encounter we had was a couple of months ago, about a week after our dog passed away. She was very old, so I don't think the mimic caused it in any way, if you were wondering. We were in the kitchen, from where you can see down the hallway. Leading off of this hallway is another short hallway with a door that had our doggy door in it. We heard the doggy door open, which was strange because we only had the one pet. We looked down the hall and saw what looked exactly like our dog. My mom was besides herself with fright and said, "Now this thing looks like Molly, our old dog." I was scared too, but aggressively said to it, "We know you're not her. She's dead. Get out of here." Then it made a horrifying noise. It sounded like a cat who had its tail stomped on. It bolted out of sight and through the doggy door. My mom and dad decided they wanted to move, so luckily we were able to move out about a month ago. I haven't seen anything out of the ordinary since this last incident, so I'm hoping it was attached to the house and not to us. Evil Doppelganger or Matrix Glitch. Submitted by user OrderJumper123. Yesterday, my fiance called me saying she had the day off and that she wanted to hang out in my apartment in the afternoon. I told her to come by after 5 because I was going to be out in the town nearby. I was running late, and on top of that, I got a flat tire on my way home. The trip seemed slower than usual. I went ahead and opened the door to my apartment, and to my surprise, my fiancé was sitting oddly in my living room. I asked her how did she get inside, if maybe I had left the door unlocked, because she didn't have a spare key. She completely freaked out and told me that I had opened the door for her, and how the heck did I get outside and change my clothes without her noticing? I live in a second-floor apartment and with one single front entrance that she was sitting by. She started crying and yelling, telling me that this joke wasn't funny. While crying, she told me that I had apparently received her, opened the door aggressively and distantly. She said that I, or it, told her that I had just woken up from a nap and my voice sounded deeper than usual and my eyes seemed irritated and red. When she asked me, or it, why my car wasn't parked, it told her to just sit down and walked away towards the restroom. Seconds later, the real me is walking in the entrance dressed completely different. She said that the me that opened the door to her was barefoot, wearing an old blue soccer jersey, and mysteriously enough, I noticed that that old blue soccer jersey is gone. My fiancé hates everything related to mystery and horror and definitely wouldn't joke around with something like this. She's completely freaked out and doesn't want to return to my apartment. I've had weird experiences, but never like this. The only plausible explanation I have is that it might be a doppelganger or some kind of matrix glitch where it was another me. I do know some people have claimed to see me in places where I've never been, both in my hometown and in the city I'm currently living in. But these people just claim to have seen me from a distance and never interacted with me. Here's a few more details. My fiancé clearly says that the other me walked into the restroom, which has a tiny window that opens about 5 inches. I went into the restroom immediately after I came home, and the window was intact, meaning whatever it wasn't physical and couldn't get out. I talked to my mother and found an experience that might be related. As a newborn in the hospital, the wrong baby was given to my mother not once, but 3 times. My mom only knew this because she dressed and fed me every day. Also, as a 5-year-old, my mom claims I was playing in a park and there was a strange-looking boy with different clothes that looked exactly like me. She freaked out but thought it was just her mind playing games with her, since when she went to look again, the little boy was gone. She had the exact same experience when I was 12 during a soccer game. I found it curious that my mom's had similar experiences, and I'm honestly not scared anymore, just curious. Yellow t-shirt with a happy face on it. Submitted by user Stigget99. I used to work in a state institute for developmentally disabled people. We were temporarily relocated to another building for remodeling of our building. Anyways, I was working one night, second shift. We had a locked pica unit, and I saw one of the residents walking down the hall. He had a very distinct gait and a very distinct yellow t-shirt with a happy face on it. I went into the ward to let staff know immediately that we had an escapee. This was a serious situation because this particular resident, Larry, would ingest absolutely anything, from clothes to pens to belts, literally anything. He was also very reluctant to go back to his home ward, which is why I didn't bring him back myself. He was going to need at least 2 escorts. When we got back into the hall, less than 15 seconds later, Larry was gone. We searched the entire building. Outside, downstairs, all the wards, he was nowhere to be found. The whole search lasted at least 10 minutes because I had extra staff looking for him. I was just about to call the house supervisor to let her know that we had lost Larry when out of the bathroom walks Larry with one of the staff members. He had been getting his bath in the bathroom the whole time. I absolutely, without a doubt, saw Larry in the hallway. I never would have short-staffed the wards like that if I hadn't seen him. Like I said, very distinctive gait, very distinctive clothing. I took a lot of razzing that night because all the other staff members thought I was crazy. The Sleepwalker, submitted by user Shamrock Fury. Back in high school, I shared a bedroom with my younger brother, which was difficult because he was a frequent sleepwalker. The hardwood floors would creak when he would get up and walk out of the room, and I would have to follow him and bring him back to bed at least 2 to 3 times a week. My brother was a hard-headed kid and was pretty difficult to scare, so it came as a surprise to me when one day he asked me if I had been noticing anything weird in the house. He tells me that when he's home alone, things have been moving on him. He'd put down a glass of juice, and if he left the glass for a moment, it would move. And one time he came back and it was empty. He started to get very uncomfortable if anyone left him home alone for more than 10 minutes or so. I came home from school one day, and he was already home and looked pretty shaken. He tells me he started to feel sick when he had gotten home, so he went downstairs to the cooler basement. And on our couch, he sees an old man sitting there, staring at him. He sprinted up the stairs and locked the door. The sleepwalking became more frequent and was almost a nightly thing after this. One night, I hear the creaks of the hardwood, my usual sign that he was on the move. And I wake up in time to see my brother standing there. The streetlight outside the window lit up the room just enough where I was able to make out his figure, staring down at his bed. I remember sitting up and saying, "Jimmy, Jimmy, hey man, lay back down." I kept repeating his name until he looked up at me, turned around, and walked out the door down the hallway, the floors creaking underneath him. Frustrated, I turned on the lamp and am about to follow him when I look down and see he's laying in his bed, asleep. No one else was awake. No one else saw a thing. I never told him about this, and a year or 2 later we moved into a new house, and he never sleepwalked again. Thank you for listening. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe, and stay tuned for more true stories of the strange and unexplained.